Hey everybody, I'm Christina with Christy Lynn Outside, coming to you from Central Louisiana, Zone 9A. Had to take a break because it's getting really hot today. It's about 84 degrees. Came outside today with a completely different plan. I was going to start a new series today on what I've learned about different crops, and today was going to be garlic, since I'm putting my garlic in my beds this month. That completely changed because I started pruning back some of the plants that weren't doing very well, like my squash. Yesterday I harvested a pretty decent size butternut squash, but this is the only one that's come up in that plant. And I thought I was being pretty smart by planting in late July some squash and zucchini to try to get away from the squash vine borer that's been plaguing me for 4 years. I haven't had any zucchini, maybe a couple squash. They just die completely and get decimated by the squash vine borer. So I figured, let me try in fall. I'm doing a fall garden for the first time this year. Let me try doing fall zucchini, fall squash. They started off really well, and then I started seeing signs of squash vine borer damage. So I injected the stems, but I don't really like to do that a whole lot because I have a big garden, I have a full-time job, I babysit my grandkids. I don't have a whole lot of time to be doing pest control in my garden. I just want to enjoy my garden. So I just let it be. Well, I got 2 acorn squash, 1 spaghetti squash that might mature before the vine dies, 1 butternut squash, and no zucchini. Just completely decimated again by the squash vine borer. So I decided to rip up all the cucurbits in my garden. My cucumbers didn't do very well. They produced like 3 or 4 cucumbers. And although I don't know if they were affected by the squash vine borer, I don't know. Nothing seemed to be doing really well. So I pulled everything up. All of the cucurbits are out now. Except for my Seminole pumpkin, which hasn't produced anything yet. There's a ton of vines, but I haven't seen any pumpkins yet. And my zucchini replicante that I just planted on my arch trellis. That is supposed to be really resistant to squash vine borer, but we'll see. When I pulled these up, I decided to pull a couple up from the root because I wanted to put some root vegetables in their spot. Guess what I found? Another pest. Yeah. So my butternut squash also has root knot nematodes. Get that. I didn't even know squash could get root knot nematodes. I thought that I was having some root knot nematode problems with my peppers. I had suspicions that my sweet peppers were having problems with root knot nematodes after doing some research. They did really well. They were nice and green and lush when I planted them. I thought for sure this year was going to be great. And then they just kind of fizzled out. They've produced a little bit, but they were really little peppers. And I thought maybe it's the marigolds that are planted in there with it that are like competing for the nutrients or something. Or, maybe I'm just not watering them enough, or maybe I was watering them too much. So I did some research, and come to find out, I thought root knot nematodes only affected tomatoes. Come to find out, root knot nematodes affect lots more than just tomatoes. Pretty much anything in the nightshade family, anything in the cucurbit family can be affected by root knot nematodes. And there's a ton of different kinds of nematodes out there. And I guess unless you get testing done, which I'm not doing, you don't really know what kind you have. So I feel like I'm at a loss here. I want, but it also kind of answers a lot of my questions too, though. Like, I had a lot of problems with my eggplants this year. I maybe got 2 or 3 eggplants. And my tomatoes were a whole nother story. They were affected by some herbicide drift, but once they finally got over the herbicide drift damage and they started to produce, they just kind of fizzled out again, just like the peppers did. So what do I do? What do I do about that? So for the past couple years, I've been just cutting my plants down at the root level, at the soil level, and letting the roots and the stems biodegrade in the soil, because I thought that that was doing my soil good. And come to find out, what if I've just been breeding nematodes this whole time? So I did a little research on how to maybe do this organically without using a ton of pesticides, which, like I said, I don't really like doing. But if the organic treatments are going to be worse or more time consuming, I don't know. So French marigolds are good for nematode resistance or nematode control, from what I hear. I don't know if the type of marigolds that I had were necessarily French marigolds. They were just kind of seeds that I had laying around, so I'm not sure if they're the right type or not. But I tried to do some chop and drop of some of my marigolds that I had, because from what I was reading, green manure chop and drop is a good way to help control nematode presence, I guess, in the soil. French marigolds are good. Mustards, I think, are good, which, I mean, I love mustards, but I don't know if I want a whole, what is that, 15 beds of mustard? I don't think I can eat that much mustard greens. And I feel like, are all of my plants gonna suffer now? Are my brassicas gonna suffer? After a little more research, I also found that brassicas are fairly resistant to root knot nematodes. In fact, broccoli and cauliflower are 2 of the things in particular, along with mustards, that help control nematode presence. So I'm growing broccoli and cauliflower in a couple of my gardens. I might throw a couple more in some of these other gardens just to see if it'll help. But do I plant any nightshades next year? Do I chance that? Do I do them only in containers? I feel like my whole garden plan is about to be dramatically changed. And this garlic that I just spent a ton of money on, this garlic seed, well, I say a ton of money, it's a ton for me. I bought seed garlic. It looks great. Do I plant that and risk that being affected as well? Are my onions gonna be affected? I'm really discouraged right now. I did read that that garlic and onions, or anything in the allium family, can be affected by a couple different types of root nematodes. Like I said, I don't know what kind I have, but it was pretty disgusting looking on my squash plants. When I pulled my pepper plants up, I didn't necessarily see a whole lot of overwhelming evidence of root knot nematode, maybe a little bit, but I did notice that the root balls were very, very underwhelming. It looked like something had been just completely eating or rotting all of my roots on my peppers. So maybe they got root rot from some different source. Maybe the rains that we had for several days in a row earlier in the summer. I don't know, but what do I do? So I think I've decided that instead of doing a whole bed of garlic and a whole bed of onions, I might split it up a little bit. I might do half garlic, half onions. They're both alliums though. Maybe I'll just kind of scatter the garlic and the onions around all of the other beds. I'll do like a bed of garlic and scatter the rest around. Help. If you have any suggestions on what I can do differently, just maybe drop a few comments. I'm desperately needing some help and guidance here because I don't know where to go next. I don't want to put my garlic or anything in my beds right now until I figure that out. So I'm definitely not doing squash, not in the spring at least, for at least another year, mostly because of the squash vine borer. I may try next fall to start some squash seedlings in a protected area and put them out a little later, maybe September, October, and see if that helps. Or maybe I'll just find some more squash vine borer resistant varieties and try those next fall. I'm definitely not doing them in the spring. But I do want to do eggplant and peppers and tomatoes. Those are my 3 favorite things to do in the spring. Again, if you have any pointers, I welcome all advice right now because I'm kind of at a stopping point right now that I just don't even know where else to turn. I can't really spend a whole lot of money on redoing the soil in all my beds. So do I just solarize them until early summer? Do I order beneficial nematodes? I mean, is that really going to help 15 beds? Is that going to be cost efficient? Do I just plant a bunch of French marigolds next spring? What do I do? The good news is that right now I have mostly brassicas in my garden. So at least I think I can survive now and still enjoy my garden until next spring. But I'm really just not looking forward to the spring now. I don't know what my plan is going to be now, and I'm not real comfortable with that. I'm usually way ahead with my planning, about a year ahead. So this is really going to change things up for me, and it's really going to be a challenge. So if you're like me and you didn't realize that these pests could affect so many different plants throughout your garden, subscribe and look in the comments, and hopefully there will be some great advice, and maybe in future videos I can incorporate all of this advice and let everyone see how my garden progresses after all of this. Thank you for watching, and so sorry to be such a downer today, man. I really just want to go inside and take a nap now. Have a great day and keep growing. Don't give up.